Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this podcast. I'm delighted to be able to have you join me here for this little bit of a show and tell that I'd like to do regarding these two fundamental concepts called statistical and substantive significance. However, I'm going to be primarily focusing in on statistical significance in this podcast. So my name is Eugene Komaroff. I'm a professor of education at the Keiser University Graduate School, and I've been teaching statistics now for the past 12 years, where six of those years were on ground. By that I mean they were in Temple University. I was teaching in classrooms, both undergraduate and graduates. And then when I came to Keiser, I started teaching online in the graduate program. And it's been an interesting journey for me because when I first started, I realized that I also had some gaps in my understanding and knowledge. So by teaching, I was also learning. And that's one of the, I think, one of the most beautiful things about being an instructor, a professor. You basically recognize some gaps, some holes, and if you want to be a student for the rest of your life, then I certainly recommend being a professor as well. That's a great way to learn and to share what you know, and also, interact with students, and you learn some things in that process as well. So hopefully I will encourage some interaction with what I have in mind here for us today. So let us proceed into the content for this presentation. All right. There is statistical significance. The concept was introduced back in 1925. So at the turn of the last century by a polymath, a statistician, a mathematician, a scientist. He was a bit of everything. His name was Ronald A. Fisher. And he wrote this book in 1925 called The Statistical Methods for Research Workers. And so we're reaching 2025 will be next year. So it's been around for about 100 years now. And since its inception, actually, it's been debated, it's been discussed, it's been controversial, this concept of statistical significance. One of the reasons that it has been controversial is that, I don't know if you know it or not, but statistics is really not one discipline. I would call it a three-legged stool, at least it used to be that. Whereas you had three components of statistical reasoning, statistical thinking, statistical theory. One was called the frequentist school, as developed by R.A. Fisher, with statistical significance. Then you have another school that is Neyman and Pearson, and Jerzy Neyman was a mathematician. He worked in England as well. Ronald Fisher was working in England too. And Jerzy Neyman came here to the United States, and shortly after World War II started, and he became a statistician professor at the University of Berkeley in California. And he had a profound influence on the statistics that are essentially practiced in the United States, which has a lot to do with confidence intervals. Now, R.A. Fisher did not like confidence intervals, and so they were in conflict with each other. They wrote and they debated and et cetera. Then you have the third school, which is known as the Bayesian school of statistics. And the Bayesian school is a completely different paradigm from the frequentist two frequentist schools. Okay, the Bayesian school has completely different theoretical orientation to how to do statistics. And they certainly don't like Fisher's stuff. They don't like Neyman's stuff. But Fisher was adamant. He hated Bayesian statistics. He basically wrote about it. You can read about it in his 1925 book, which, by the way, has gone through 14 editions. So he's been developing his thoughts as he goes, which goes back to what I said earlier. If you want to be a perennial student, then I suggest be a professor like Fisher, who taught, and he also worked in the field, in the agricultural research field. He was also developed the idea of randomized controlled experiments. That was his conception, and that's something that's used, everywhere now. Randomized controlled experiments, and in the pharmaceutical industry, they're called randomized clinical trials. This is all of Fisher's invention. Anyway, to get back to these three schools of thought, now it turns out in this century we have another school showing up, and it's being called data science or statistical science, and it has a lot to do with, and its methodology is called data mining, knowledge discovery, machine learning, and these are data sets that are huge, they're massive. And so the philosophy, the theory that Fisher developed back in 1925, they didn't have such massive data sets. The whole concept was you had some small data sets, relatively small data sets. And so the idea of statistical significance was applied to small data sets. Once the data became huge, statistical significance plays a different role. You have to adjust for things. You have to be worried about other sort of nonsense developing. So it's not all that useful, in my opinion. When you get sample sizes that are larger than 1,000, sample size of 1,000 or more, you best stop thinking statistical significance and start thinking data science. I do not think data science. I think statistical significance. I'm back with the classical school, and most of the projects that I work on with students, dissertations, or research papers, there's no massive data sets. They're all small data sets, all under 1,000. So statistical significance to me is a major, major tool, a very important tool for the way I reason about analyses. Now, I mentioned that the controversies between the schools was one problem. By the way, when I mentioned data science, that stool has now become a chair with four legs, and it has a backbone at this point. I mean, there's some strong mathematical computational stuff going on out there, which is exciting. And, I'm love to see how much more will get developed, how much more knowledge could possibly surface from their methodology. However, the knowledge that surfaces from statistical significance, from dealing with small data sets, is still the same that was gained back in 100 years ago. Okay, so I don't want that to disappear. Now, because statistical significance has been misinterpreted and abused, a journal called the Basic and Applied Social Psychology banned any mention of statistical significance in their published papers. They wanted authors to take this stuff out of their papers. So they weren't permitted anymore to publish anything. They wouldn't publish anything that says p-values, statistical significance, null hypothesis testing, all of that stuff out. Okay, so this was, wow, quite a blow as far as I'm concerned to what I, liked, what I work with, what I've made a career out of. I mean, they were threatening my career here with this stuff. I didn't like it. Then came the American Statistical Association decided to make a statement. They recognized the issues, the problems. They said nothing new here, but we want to explain. So in 2016, they published this statement for the purpose and, as they say, p-values, just about p-values and statistical significance, context, process, and purpose. And they wrote, we're talking about p-values in non-technical terms to researchers, practitioners, and science writers who are not primarily statisticians to improve the conduct or interpretation of quantitative science. Okay, so it was supposed to be something that's going to be easy to understand. Well, here are the principles. I'm not going to read them, But I looked at these things, and quite frankly, I've been around this stuff for many, many years now. I've been an applied statistician for 33 years. And I look at what they wrote here, and some of this really did not seem to make sense or was difficult to understand for me even. So I couldn't see why, students, applied researchers, and science writers would appreciate what they had to write, what they wrote, when I couldn't even understand what they wrote. So I felt, oh, there's something really off here. I don't know what they're after with this stuff. And, I was reassured again in my perceptions of this because journal articles started coming out to explain the p-value statement. Okay. And these are not low level, journal, low level journals. By that, I mean, this is not magazine articles. This is technical literature, academic literature, and, trying to explain what the American Statistical Association was explaining. So this is wacky also. It's clear that this stuff is difficult to understand then. Okay. But now the situation became even worse as far as I'm concerned, because back now in 2019, moving to a world beyond p less than 0.05, which is the typical usual level of statistical significance, they decided to ban statistical significance. So when I say ban, I don't mean that it was the American Statistical Association. It was these three editors who wrote an editorial, and they wrote, stop using the term statistically significant entirely, nor should variance such as significantly different, p less than 0.05, and non-significant survive, whether expressed in words, by asterisks, in a table, or some other way. What a pronouncement. What a proclamation. This really, really got me going. And it was upsetting to me, and it got me going. So I was happy to see that it wasn't just it was just the editors, that there were another group at the American Statistical Association got together, and they called them a task force, and they came back with their statement saying the use of p-values and significance testing, which is statistical significance testing, properly applied and interpreted, no question about that, are important tools that should not be abandoned. Boy, I stood up and cheered. Okay. Then I found another article from the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the premier medical research journals in this country. And they wrote, despite the difficulties, p-values continue to have an important role in medical research. P-values interpreted by reliably calculated thresholds, subjected to appropriate adjustments, have a role in these decisions. So there are some issues with, p-values being distorted, et cetera. But, that requires education, not banning is what I'm saying. Okay, so I decided that's enough. I'm glad to see others have joined in my sentiment. So I said, okay, I'm going to write my own article as well and just express myself and try to make things a little clearer for the way I see the situation. So I wrote this article. I sent it to quite a few journals. I was rejected all over the place. And this is another lesson in resilience. You have to, if you really believe something, you have to continue pressing for it. And eventually you'll succeed, but it does take work. It does take effort, but it also takes strong belief in something. Okay, so I strongly believed in what I wrote. The editor liked what I wrote, but it's the Journal of Statistical Theory and Practice. And I was pushing for the practice part and, focusing on the practice, on the use of p-values for researchers. But he wanted more theory because the journal is Statistical Theory and Practice. Well, so he kept asking me for more theory. So I kept, learning, actually. I studied a little more. I was glad in a way that he asked for that because I learned something I didn't realize before. Okay, so that's fine. But the article became dense, became much more complex than I had originally intended. But, the editor said, you do this, I'll publish it. Well, son of a gun, it happened. It was published in June of 2020. Okay. At this point, the article is not free. It's behind a paywall. And to access the article, somebody has to pay close to, well, almost $40, 39.95, almost $40 to access the article. And there has been 1,469 times that this article has been accessed by whoever wants to, read it. And so I felt, well, that's good. And then, as an academic, we like citations. I mean, as an academic, you basically live by publish or perish. And so you have to publish, you have to put out papers, you have to put and be part of a scientific community or an academic community in your discipline. Okay, so I had 14 citations, and you see, I put an applauding hands there because I liked citations. I thought, great, maybe I'm reaching somebody. Somebody's starting to recognize what I'm writing. So let me see. Let me check these citations, and you can do that on Google Scholar these days. So I went ahead and I checked to see who the citations were. And it's really amazing to me that my article reached an unexpected and surprising audience of engineers working on artificial intelligence, lithium batteries, cryptocurrency, and friction coefficients at tunnel entrances of mountain highways. Now, I'm glad they found something in the theory, something in what I wrote that has helped them advance their careers, their professions, and is being useful to them. No question about that. But it missed the mark. This really missed the mark. This is not what I had in mind. I wasn't just trying to, increase my citation count on my CV. Um, I was trying to actually reach a different audience, an audience of social scientists, an audience that the board statement stated. That is, I wanted to reach students, applied researchers, and science writers for that matter, because they don't quite understand what they're writing sometimes when it comes to statistical significance testing. So that was my audience. I see that this is not the people I wanted to reach. So I'm delighted by citations, but I went ahead and did something else and this is relatively recent. So this is why I'm delighted to be here with you for this podcast, because I want to share these information with you. These are two articles. I'm going to show you two articles that I published. This was the first one. And this one took a little doing because I explained to the editor that this is going to be a simplified tutorial version of an article that I already published back in 2020. And they, alerted me to, well, make sure it's sufficiently different in a lot of ways, because otherwise you'll be self-plagiarizing, and we don't need that. That is a, very, very bad thing in academia, especially. You can't do that. That's just manipulating the system. That's dishonesty. It's just not acceptable. So I reassured them that I'm going to approach this from a very different, it's going to be applied. It's going to be the same topic, but I want to, demonstrate it differently. I want to show it differently. And also because of the audience that I reached, I realized maybe some of the stuff I had in the first paper was just a little too dense, too complex. So I'm trying and hoping that, these latest papers will bring it to a much wider and less, sophisticated, wrong word, sophisticated. Let's just say less, well, whatever, less technically oriented people and more social science people. And that's what I'm interested in particular, because after all, the ban on statistical significance starts with the journal Basic and Applied Social Psychology. So it's social science. Okay, so this article at this point, this was published back in May 7, 2024. And so at this point, it had 1,141 views. Okay, so that's like, the access stuff from the paid journal, except this is an open access. This is available to anyone. With, all you have to do is go to that website and you click on it and you have the full article. You can download it as a PDF file. You can put a review about it below the article, it appears. And I've had 8 reviewers respond. with comments to me. And, I'm delighted. And I have 157 people that downloaded the paper for whatever purpose they want. And I'm glad. But this was the previous work interpreted in a slightly different way and made easier. I hope, I think, I want that to be the fact. However, I'm noticing that, all the reviewers were professors, high-level academics, also engineers, quite a few of them, or working in the engineering divisions. But at least they started to, explain, what they're seeing and understanding. And some of them were, high-level statisticians that thought this is too simple. This is a back and forth thing, and I appreciate their remarks, their comments, but I explained to them that my paper is not, focused or targeting on sophisticated, well advanced, high level statisticians. This is for people that just want a basic understanding of the concepts. Okay, so then I became motivated, given that I've gotten some positive reaction to this, and I basically worked on a new project, and I sent it to the American Statistical Association for their annual conference in August 2024, which is coming up. And I was surprised that they accepted my presentation, my paper for oral presentation. So I'll be doing that on August the 7th of this year. And I'm going to be presenting this paper. So I decided the other paper was actually just published on the website. So I'd have no intention of putting it into print because I already have one in print. So it's sort of my way of saying, look, it was different, but at the same time, I don't plan to send this out to any journal at this point. Okay. But this new one, I put up there as a preprint. Okay. So, and I told the editor that, you see, it's right there, preprint. And so I told the editor that, my intention here is to get this published in a Journal of Statistical Education. But I would appreciate comments. I'd appreciate feedback. Appreciate hearing and seeing and knowing what people understand, don't understand. I need questions. I need, reactions. And then I can, edit, I can revise, I can change, I can do some things to make it even more readable and more acceptable to a wider audience. So this is why, I'm presenting here in this podcast these papers, and I'm inviting you to do something with them. Now you see, you can go to this website and you can click and you can review this article there and post your review, and I would see it there. But, that's not necessarily the only way you can talk to me about the articles. So let me just tell you about, just make a statement to you as to why, what the main objectives are of this latest paper. In fact, the two papers. So I published the two open access articles on the web for review and comments. These papers had two goals: provide intuitive insight into statistical and substantive significance intersections with histograms, bar graphs, and crosstabs. And two, convincingly demonstrate with graphs and a few numbers that statistically significant p-values are valuable for screening out effect sizes that would otherwise be misinterpreted as substantively significant. Dr. Komaroff hopes the papers will help students, applied researchers, and science writers to properly understand and appreciate the value of statistical significance for scientific inference and decision-making with small sample sizes in the face of uncertainty, because statistical significance is always in the face of uncertainty. There's always some doubt that there might be something else that might explain your results. So that's the goal here for these two papers. I'm particularly interested in your comments for the last paper, for the most recent paper, and I also include something about a false null hypothesis. See, the other ones were all about true null hypothesis. Here I introduce something about the false null hypothesis, in which case it turns out to be that I was doing a power calculation. But you can learn all about that by reading the paper, and we can discuss it. So with that, I'm going to end this presentation.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember every story has its next page.